Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. Hello, smart people. How are you all today? I've been struck by a thought recently and I wanted to share it with you. So, yesterday, someone from the University of Chicago sent me a form to fill out. It's a directory of all the founders and investors who are UChicago alumni. So, I proudly filled in some basic details about Tech for Non-Techies, and then there was a notes section. Lots of people used that note section to say that their companies were fundraising, or to explain what they did, or to share some news. I'm not fundraising, and I wanted to write something short and something memorable because, honestly, nobody is going to remember some boring, long corporate press release. So I just wrote 3 words. Knowledge is power. Then I played them over again in my mind and I thought, wow, knowledge is power. That sounds good. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. My aim is to give you, smart people, the knowledge that you need to have power in our digital age. It's so easy to just be a passive user of all the tech around us and to hand over our data without knowing what happens to it and to just assume that you'll never understand tech jargon and you'll never be able to be part of the tech boom, so why even bother? Let's just give up now. But that is not a position of agency. That is not a position of power. That's being a sheep. And we're not sheep here. We're smart people. If you're listening to this, you're smart. We can be powerful, active participants in today's digital economy. So, I'm thinking of actually making that the strapline for Tech for Non-Techies. So, Tech for Non-Techies, knowledge is power. And since you're a listener, I would love to know what you think. Does this sound good to you? Or do I sound like a megalomaniac Bond villain, which, is not necessarily a bad thing. I might get a cat and a monocle. But anyway, let me know what you think. Tell me on Tech for Non-Techies social media. So we are on Tech for Non-Techies on Instagram or Tech for Non-Techies community on Facebook. Or you could just tweet to me at Sophia Matveeva. Or if you're on the email list, you could just ping me an email and put knowledge is power in the subject line and tell me, should we use it? What do you think of it? How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel anything? Continuing on with today's session. Today's guest is certainly in line with this theme. Today, we are hearing from Beri. He is the founder of Ivy, the social university, and you'll learn all about that in this episode. Beri is a true Renaissance man, as you will hear. He has an MBA from Harvard, he used to work in banking, and now he is a non-technical founder of a global tech platform. And he has recently been hanging out with Matthew McConaughey, which I think is just very cool because he is very hot. So basically, what's not to like? Normally, on this podcast, when you hear from guests, you would get a director's cut of a session that we would have had for our members. But today, I want to share the full session so you can get an inside look of what it's like to be a member. If you remember, you get to join these live sessions. They are on video, they take place every week, and you can ask the guests your questions, get feedback on what you're working on from them, or you could just send me questions and I will ask on your behalf. So in this episode, I'm asking Beri my questions and questions that have been sent to me by our members. If you want to join our live sessions and ask experts like Beri your questions, then come join our membership. And without further ado, here's Beri.
Hi, Sophia. So great to be here. I'm really excited for our conversation. Ivy today is an organization and a community that focuses on one thing, unlocking potential. And we do that through two key ingredients. On the one hand, learning, and on the other hand is community and connection. So I deeply believe that if you want to unlock your own potential, if you want to help people unlock their potential, all it takes truly are these two ingredients. And our community is all about enabling both individuals and organizations to do that for themselves, their constituents, and then, of course, their communities and the world at large.
And this used to take place offline and online, because I remember I went to one of your events in London when you had a very impressive TED speaker and an impressive crowd. But I'm assuming that during COVID you had to transition online. So would you be able to tell us where you deliver all this amazing stuff right now?
Yeah, very happy to. I should say that that mission that I described just earlier, that has never changed. But how we deliver on that mission changes all the time. And COVID was obviously a huge moment in which that happened again. So right now, what we do is, on the one hand, we partner with companies who sign up their teams and sometimes their clients for our experiences. And we also partner with individual leaders, a lot of business leaders who want to unlock their potential. So specifically how it works is at two levels. Level one is every month we host 12 experiences with 12 of the most impressive leading minds of our time that can give us the most practical learnings. And so we look through thousands of people publishing every single month. We select 12 of them to feature. So we have 3 of them join us for a live conversation where, together with our audience, we dive into learning from them. So specifically, we focus on 4 key areas. We focus on performance and well-being at an individual level. We also focus on leadership and management at an organizational level. Then we focus on growth and innovation, how to get out of our comfort zones and be ahead of the curve. And then finally, we focus on impact, everything around sustainability, equity, inclusion, and reimagining capitalism, really learning from historical experience to shape how business can have the biggest positive impact that it can. So 12 times a month, we have these guests joining us, everyone from leading Fortune 100 CEOs to #1 best-selling business authors to also scientists, artists, wellness experts, everyone who can help us basically unlock our potential.
And Matthew McConaughey, from what I hear as well.
Yes.
It's not strictly relevant for Tech for Non-Techies, but as a female fan, very important to me.
Yeah, and so individuals like Matthew McConaughey, whether it's like an Academy Award winner like him, or whether it's an Olympic gold medalist, whenever you have a conversation with someone who has gotten to the very top of their field, it's pretty amazing because they figured out a way to perform consistently in a way that gets them to #1 position. And often that actually takes a massive amount of focus on your individual well-being. So there's so much to learn about how to deal with dark days and challenges, and also wins from individuals like this that went all the way. So he was amazing. And obviously, anyone who might be interested, let us know. We'd love to share that conversation with you as well. So after we host each of these sessions, 12 of them a month, within 24 hours, we put them into our learning library. So you can listen to them as a podcast, you can watch it as a video, and we also put together really nice learning documents. So you have access to all of that. That's level one. Then level two, that's like the learning piece. Level two is all about interactivity. So whether it's for individual members or for companies that signed up, we host essentially immersive conversations, very Socratic in nature, where we learn from each other. So we all focusing on all these key themes we've been covering that month. What were our key learnings? What are the key actions we're going to take? How can we support each other? And what shared experiences we have? So those are the two levels at which Ivy delivers right now. When COVID hit, we went from being 80%, 80 to 90% in person and 80 to 90% B2C. So all of a sudden, and focused on, we were in 8 cities only. So London plus 7 US cities. Now, fast forwarding almost a year, we're in 80 countries. We've signed up almost 130 companies, including some big players. And we're able to better scale what we were doing before. So, of course, it wasn't without its challenges, but lots of learnings to share.
Exciting. I'm really excited about all of this. So tell me about some of the companies. I remember when I was actually one of your speakers talking about what non-technical founders need to know about tech. I believe in April when COVID just hit and we were all a bit confused. And I remember I was due to teach offline at London Business School, actually on the campus, and then ended up having to put the entire course online, which was a good thing because then I've ended up then opening that same course to people who were not at LBS. So actually it ended up being a good thing, but it was a very unexpected, stressful experience at the time, which I think, April for many of us was. But I remember then you mentioned some pretty impressive companies that you're working with even a year ago. So now you must have a very enviable list. Would you mind telling us about some of them?
Yeah, very happy to. So some of them are bigger name companies. Some are, not as well known because they're 20, 30, 50 people, younger, earlier stage companies. But regardless of whether it's, a small company or a large company, at the end of the day, every organization is made up of people. They have their values, they have their purpose, and they have insane number of opportunities and challenges. So what we found, obviously when you're building an earlier stage venture, one thing you'll hear all the time is you got to focus. And it's true. You have to focus and try to be the best at what you do. At the same time, focusing too soon on something when you're still figuring out and getting that data in isn't great. So right now we don't have a sweet spot for this is the kind of organization for us. So I'm very proud to say we've got everything from, 20-person companies to companies with tens of thousands of people. But we also have companies from finance to construction to tech to insurance and every kind of industry out there. So, and that's because they're all made up of people. And I'm a big believer, not every school of thought is in line with this, but I'm a huge believer in universality. I think that, yes, of course, every culture and industry has its specifics and nuances, but ultimately, when it comes to those key areas, I talked about performance, growth, leadership, impact. We're all humans. We're all striving to be our best selves. We're all struggling with that. So we really focus on what would be universally applicable across the board, no matter where people are coming from. So on the larger side, we've had the incredible pleasure of working with companies like Citigroup, Piaget, Enterprise, and every day, we're expanding our reach and making an impact. And, for me, I grew up international. So the most meaningful part of this has been the fact that, scaling that impact across borders. In fact, as we all know by now, over Zoom, it doesn't matter if someone's your next door neighbor or they live on the other side of the world. It's just the same, to just click connect and speak with them. So that's been a powerful experience for us.
Exactly. Well, you're in Miami and I'm in the Côte d'Azur today. So, it's not all bad, right? So tell me about the technology products that you have, because I know that you have a website, but it's not just a Squarespace simple thing. It actually does quite a lot of stuff. And especially, it has to, because you're now supporting a lot of different types of content. So what digital products do you have?
Yeah, so we have a desktop website, which we built custom. We also have an iOS and an Android app. And then we have two versions of our platform. One is for B2C, a consumer-facing one that actually has quite a few additional peer-to-peer functionalities. And then we have an organizational one that's actually pared down a little bit, but it's more focused and enables teams to work better together. But ultimately, they draw on the same backend. Mm-hmm. So whenever we make an improvement in one area, it propagates across all of them. But we do give a lot of people consume what we do on their mobile phones, on different platforms. But we do have two distinct, like B2C versus B2B platforms, all based on the same source code.
So same source code, but am I right? Is it 5 different tech products and 5 different front ends? Or is it 4?
Well, I actually like to think of it as, we internally don't think of them as separate. And that, I think, is a matter of perspective. Obviously, the mobile apps are running on React, and the web app is like a different source code. But ultimately, from a consumer perspective, right, it's one product that we offer. And then there's two versions in which how it appears. One is a pared down organizational one. The other one has more like a B2C one. But ultimately, again, a lot of it is similar, and we're very content driven. So ultimately, it's just about how do people access and interact with this content. So typically when we're managing our product vision, as well as like the tactical upgrades on all fronts, we like to always start with like the customer experience. We don't think about for this platform or that platform. We just say, okay, here's a challenge that our customers are facing. Here's an opportunity they have. How do we make that better? We start with that, and then it propagates across the different platforms in different ways.
So you've just said quite a lot of kind of techie words. So earlier on you mentioned beta. Now we're talking about React. We're talking about product vision. And you sound like a technical founder, but you're not. So would you be able to tell us what it is that you did before you founded a company with all of these, with this back end that's connecting all of these different people? So what's your background?
Yeah, happy to. So I was born in Turkey, grew up in Scotland, and then studied in the States undergrad, worked in London at Morgan Stanley, and then came back to the US for business school. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so it was very much a business environment. At the same time, it was, textile manufacturing and retail, so it was not, technical in the sense of like coding and so forth. I attempted to take a computer science class at Brown as an undergrad in my freshman year, and realized very quickly that I have to choose between trying to pass that course and potentially failing everything else, or focus on what I'm best at, which is much more, I'm definitely, I guess the way I think about it is like, there are people who love puzzles, right? They want to solve those puzzles. And then there are people who, like writing essays and stuff like that. So I'm the latter type. So I'm definitely not a puzzle solver just for the sake of solving the puzzle. But I love thinking about like, how can the world be different? What that vision looks like on one page, on a blank page, just sharing that. And then working backwards, what are the steps to get there? And then what's the first step to take? So that's been approach to entrepreneurship for me. And yeah, so I've got quite a lot of learnings from being a non-technical founder. We've always figured it out. It's definitely possible, even without a technical co-founder, to have a successful platform. But it certainly doesn't hurt if you do have someone who's tech savvy by your side. But if you don't, then I can share some tips on how to go about it anyway.
What you said about a coding course versus the rest of your life really resonated with me, because when I left business school and I started building a tech business as a non-technical founder, I was so insecure about my non-tech abilities that I decided to take an online course from Stanford, just to add to the Chicago Brief MBA, because, that wasn't enough. And it was a painful and unnecessary experience. And I think that a lot of the tech industry, a lot of the VCs, a lot of the stuff coming out of TechCrunch essentially drives non-technical people who want to get into tech to believe that there's either some sort of second-class citizen, or to think that, okay, if you don't know this stuff, you have to know this stuff. And if your brain is more of the meandering creative essay type, then, just stick to journalism or whatever. And this is one of my missions on Tech for Non-Techies, is to showcase different types of founders and to showcase that actually people with different mentalities and different interests can actually build successful tech businesses. And I find that we do find solutions. Sometimes it takes us longer, sometimes it's more expensive, but we do find solutions. So you were saying that you were working at Morgan Stanley and then you went to business school. And is that when you got the idea for Ivy? I mean, you went to Harvard, and that's Ivy League, so Ivy coming out of Harvard would kind of make sense?
Well, yeah, so definitely the idea for the company was based on both my undergrad and my graduate school experience. So the key learning or the key reflection I had was the fact that, when you're in this collegiate environment, when you're in school, right? It's a truly incredible environment. It's a place in which all day long, all you're doing is learning from really amazing people, dreaming about the future, what you want to do with your life. And you're doing this with an incredible group of peers, each and every single one of whom could become a lifelong friend or a thought partner or a business partner. And that's all day and night for years, right? Like 4 years undergrad, 2 years business school. My thought, and then in between I worked, right? In between those two experiences, I was in London. And what I found is that, London is an incredible city, millions of amazing people. And without COVID, thousands of events every single day. There's so much going on. But what was missing, and similar when I moved to New York after business school, what's missing in these great cities is the sense of cohesion and community and camaraderie, something that was like everywhere. If you have the opportunity to be at a university, it's everywhere. And then once you come out, it's just gone, right?
Well, that's true. In a big city, it sometimes really feels like, no one cares if you could just, lie down and die. I think during COVID, people have come together a bit more. And actually, I met my neighbors in London for the first time, really, during the pandemic, even though we were living in the same apartment building for years. But sorry, please continue. So you want to bring the sense of community as well as learning.
Yeah, exactly. And then working backwards, the model of a university is not new. They've been going for quite a few centuries. But it kind of baffled me that, we know that is a great experience for many people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, especially in the US where I got to study, it's like, you talk about your college years, time of your life, and then you go into the real world, like something really beautiful ends.
And then things go wrong.
Exactly. So my thought was, that doesn't make sense. I mean, if you can just create a sense of community that's focused on learning and connection, just like a university is, but just make it lifelong, it's possible. But the only way it's possible, right, unless you have billions of dollars to build a campus in every city, which already there's so many, the only way to do it is, on the one hand, really go to the first principles of what makes a university experience so special? What are those key ingredients? And then how can we leverage technology? And how can we leverage a creative model of organizing that enables us to have the same experience throughout our lives and across the world, right? So it's been 7 years since we launched. And like I said, it didn't take a pandemic. We've changed our model tons of times because we keep learning. And the beauty of for-profit enterprises, people aren't funding you just because it's a great cause. You have to actually deliver the numbers. You have to show that it's working. And if you can't show that, then it's also a big signal to you that, hey, you know what? You got to do this better. You got to create more value so that it self-funds. So it took a long time, but we've distilled it to those are the two key ingredients: learning and community. And whether that's in person or over Zoom, and this is a lesson for everybody here, no matter what you're doing, right? If you really want to unlock your potential or others, you can always think, doesn't matter what the format is. Are we at a dinner? Is it a breakfast? Are we jogging together? Are we on Zoom? Are we on Clubhouse? It doesn't really matter. You can always ask yourself, how can I maximize the substance of the learning here? And how can I maximize the connection between people here? If you answer those two questions, you're going to unlock potential better than you would otherwise. And that's the mission that we're on. We're figuring out how to best do this for individual leaders as well as companies as well.
Gosh, Beri, talking to you is like having a cup of espresso. I'm just loving this. So I am also really interested in this because I think that a lot of our audience are people who work in large companies or traditional businesses that have had to make a very quick and unexpected pivot, which has been really dramatic. The dramatic pivot to digital, especially if you're working in retail, which I think had similar numbers. So about 80% of the sales were coming from offline, and now they've had to completely basically go online. So it's interesting to learn from you about how essentially the same idea and the same vision has gone from just one set of delivery to another set of delivery. So now let's talk about the technology. Before COVID, your business was mainly offline. So did you focus much on the technology, or was that something that you really accelerated in the past year?
No, I mean, first of all, I should say, let's zoom out a little bit so that I can share. So in terms of like the roadmap, that really worked for me, and I think might be great for both non-technical and technical founders too. Before, like, first of all, the very first reaction for a lot of people is, I have a concept, gonna build a website, gonna build an app. Like, that's just the immediate, it's just like what we do. We did the same thing, right? It's like,
oh yeah, I did the same thing. It was a bit too trigger happy, basically.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, it is, quote unquote, relatively easier just build a website than like build a store or build a building, right? Like, I mean, that's obvious to people, or at least it seems that way. So the immediate reaction is that. So one of the things that we learned very quickly, and thankfully we had this incredible graphic designer who then also became our product lead, Carolina. But what was amazing partnering with her is whatever I visualize in my head, she could illustrate like the real thing. And then we could use software platforms to really simulate as though the platform was built. Back then, you could even do this on a PowerPoint, just like put it on full screen and pretend you're clicking the buttons and it would just go to the next slides. Now, obviously, there's incredible tools that can fully simulate an app and so on. So the first thing is like really figuring out, okay, what does the platform need to do? In our case, it was, well, we need to list experiences, we need to list people, and then we need to let people RSVP to experiences and connect with each other. Like, those were our two main kind of, use cases of like what we wanted to happen. The connection and then the learning. And then we needed a way to...
Sorry to interrupt, but just to go back to first principles, when you think about user, did you already know the kind of user you were targeting? Because, when you're building a product, you're building a solution to a problem that somebody is experiencing. So did you know this at the beginning? Because at the beginning, when I was building my first products, I was so focused on building the product that I think I kind of lost sight of the user. That only I really started understanding how important that was when we already had users in the market. So then our products become kind of co-created with the users. But I know a lot of people didn't make the same mistake and thought of, okay, who is exactly the person who I'm solving for? Where in those camps did you fall?
Yeah. So, I mean, we built something that we ourselves wanted in the world. So we were also the consumers. So that helped. And then we were also very quick to get things live, to start doing things, to get like real customer feedback as quickly as possible. One thing that we didn't do, it took us a few years, but I wish we had done at the beginning to make sure, because I've definitely made the mistake that you mentioned, right? You always start with the customer because like otherwise, like there'd be no business concept. But then you get stuck in the weeds because like there's so much going on, and there's your product, your sales, tech, the people stuff that's happening in your team, investors and all of that, right? So one tool that now we use religiously is the one we use is called Ask Nicely. There's many other ones out there, but it's a way to essentially just after everything we host, every interaction with the customer, we just like they get an email 0 to 10. To what extent would you recommend this experience to a friend or colleague? The NPS, Net Promoter Score question. Now, everyone on our team has access to every feedback in real time. So we check it like we check social media, constantly refreshing and after every experience. And what that does is it eliminates the possibility that you get too distracted because your customer is constantly telling you, it gives you a quantitative score out of 10. And we aim to get a 9 out of 10 on average when they give that 0 to 10 score. And then, so then you can solve for, well, what do we need to do to make sure it's above a 9? What could we have done better and so on? So that gave us a really nice, instead of, this is my opinion as the CEO, or this is someone else's opinion as this customer relationship manager, we had the customer's voice in the company constantly as soon as we implemented that product. So that's been very helpful.
That's good to get kind of consistent customer feedback about them actually giving it to you, because another way that, especially content companies do it is that literally you see how many people have watched a particular session or how much they watched it. And that's one way of doing it. But, if your customers can also then give you feedback and they're voluntarily giving you this feedback loop, that's really useful. Okay, so you had this vision and you're working with a designer. What kind of designer was she? So what was her background?
Well, she was a graphic designer, but she was also someone who was able to be artistically, whatever she produced looked like $1 billion. I mean, like, I could have the most half-baked idea that, like, but like you looked at it and you're like, wow, that thing looks really legit, like it just looked, but not just legit, but also it had soul, it had emotion. Like it really felt like, wow, and it looked better actually than what a lot of very established companies had. So extremely skilled artist who was also business savvy. So she really got that ultimately, though, this isn't just to be beautiful. And of course it was a partnership, right? So what we learned is, if she came up with something and I really didn't like it, or if I gave a piece of feedback and she was like, no way, we're not doing that, then we compromised and found a middle way. So if either of us said hell no, then we found a middle way. But in general, 80 to 90% of stuff, we're on the same page and just refined things together. So she was a graphic designer, but over time, she became, more and more savvy at also the hardcore product management. And she became our product lead. But it was a very unique thing because she had the artistic skill, she had the business savvy, she was an amazing people manager, extreme hard worker and prioritizer. So exactly the kind of leader you need to manage feedback from team and customers, turn it into functional designs, and then, really make sure developers are able to understand why they're doing it. So they're not just being told hey, do this and that, but they really buy into it. And then be thought partners in the process as well.
So it's interesting that she was a graphic designer, because I often associate graphic design with somebody who makes very beautiful images or beautiful logos, which is not the same as user experience design. And in fact, I remember the first ever designer that I worked with, when I didn't know that there are graphic designers and UX designers and UI designers, because honestly, unless somebody tells you, how are you supposed to know? I barely knew that I was supposed to work with a designer. I thought I was supposed to work with developers, which is what a lot of non-technical founders think at the beginning. And so I worked with somebody who was so focused on graphics that he really completely missed usability. So making something intuitive to use, making something that, that people understood where to swipe. And for example, I find that a lot of the high fashion apps, so especially, something like Vogue, they're so focused on the graphic design and on the beauty that their apps are a nightmare to use. And actually their usability time, the amount of time you sit in the app is quite low, because it just doesn't engage you and doesn't kind of serve you the stuff that you want. So was this person a graphic designer who then, through her business brain and her technical prowess learned tech skills, or was she a graphic designer who already knew about user experience and app design?
Yeah. So she had also a little bit of a UX background, but actually we looped in a friend of hers, and this was all freelance at the beginning, who was a hardcore UX person. So she did the wireframes and so on. I think though, just for the sake of the audience and, just to maybe make it more into a timeline as opposed to jumping a little bit. So basically my process has been, there's an idea. I'll force myself to put it into a one-pager on what's the big idea? What does success look like? How it works? Just generally. If that one page isn't exciting to other people, then, before doing anything, just really refining, that, right? And that also verbally helps you communicate. So that was step number one. Step number two is, okay, to deliver that, then what are the inputs needed? And for a lot of us, that will require a technical platform, whether it's an app or some way for people to engage and submit information or view information and content and so forth. So the next step from there was like, okay, again, on a Word document. I mean, I would do this in a Word document, just like, what are the different pages? What are they? What should be in each one? Just making it up. It can be completely changed later, but that's what I did for myself. And then it's, really refining that with the team and so on. And only then, kind of starting to design some visuals. And I do think UX is critical. I mean, usability is definitely, if you have to choose between beauty, if it's not usable, it can be the most beautiful thing, but it won't go anywhere. At the same time, before coding a single line or paying $1 to, Amazon Web Services or whatever, I think the key is, if you can't just look at a prototype that was just visually designed, if you look at it, like, let's say a product, if you don't look at a prototype that you absolutely love, you think it's so amazing and that you can show to people and they also think amazing, do not build it. Like, you don't have to waste any money, because the biggest nightmare and the worst thing that ever happened to me was paying a developer to do something and then really not liking how it's coming out. So that's why I found that, like, getting really comfortable with, like, those key functionalities, what it looks like, how it flows, it's so much cheaper to, work with UX and with a UX and a visual designer before a single line is coded, before you spend anything on an actual, like, a coded platform, whether it's like a white labeled one or one that you're going to build. So for me, that was important. By the way, the reason why is because I was then able to iterate stuff that I thought was super good to include on a page. Once I saw it visually, it wasn't. And I'm not just a non-technical founder in terms of, like, coding. I'm also completely non-technical when it comes to drawing, painting, doing wireframes, and all the other kind of stuff too. So I would say, like, concept, putting it into words, working with a UX and visual designer to create a beautiful platform. And throughout that process, constantly iterating yourself, but also showing it to lots of would-be users to get their feedback and stuff. But you also know, like, it's like shopping, which I hate, but, like, it's like shopping. The advice is, if you don't love it, don't buy it. You know that? Like, I mean, if you don't love it, do not build it. Like, keep tweaking what it's like, and, like, if you show it to prospective investors or potential customers, if they're like, wow, that's really cool, when people are just saying it versus so it's actually relatively cheap, relatively to, like, actually building, to have that visual design. Once you actually have the very robust UX and visual design, it actually also becomes infinitely easier to get quotes from developers because, like, there's no mystery as much to how it works, because they can actually see the pages. Of course, you may still need to make some trade-offs. They might tell you, yeah, you want to do that too? That's going to take twice as long and cost, 4 times as much. But if you pare that down, so again, it's like you iterate once for the UX, then through the visual, and then with the developers. You can also decide, do I want it custom developed, or is there a white label solution based on what I'm trying to do here? Could it be done on Squarespace? Could it be done on Shopify or something? So you can also make those decisions. But ultimately, if you're looking to raise money or entice people to join you on your journey, they can't look and feel your product. It's going to be a lot harder. But they can actually look and feel your product without you doing a single line of code, if you have a really robust prototype that's made up of the UX and the visual design.
It's interesting that you viewed your designer really like a part of your business team, because I think, a mistake that I certainly made when I was making my first product is that I saw designers as people who were just working on the product. But actually, design isn't just about making a thing. It is about bringing the users and the business vision together, and then getting those two inputs to create something. So it's not just here's my vision, make it. It's definitely a co-creation process. Well, actually, for my first company, for our first ever product, we hired some designers, and this was the second lot of designers. The first designer was very, very graphics driven, not so much about UX, but also at the time it was literally a friend of a friend who was working for free. So I can't, I can't really blame because he was just learning with us and we were learning with him. But then the first bit of money that we actually did spend was on a real professional design firm. Got a prototype, a really, really good prototype that went through testing and iteration because our first prototype was completely incomprehensible and totally useless. And, we took that, iterated it, made a decent prototype that actually had really good user feedback, and then used that to raise money. And it's amazing, for people who want to raise money, that if you have a prototype that you can show to people, it's actually way more effective than any kind of PowerPoint presentation that you're going to give, because everybody's going to have some kind of graph which basically goes like this, to the right and up, which promises some kind of version of world domination. And I've literally had VCs saying to me, I do not look at that page, everybody's got one. But if they can actually see, okay, this is the prototype, and you're telling me that you need X amount of money to develop it because you already have these quotes from these developers, and once you develop it, then your next milestone is going to be X many users or this much revenue, then actually it's a much more concrete, specific conversation about specific things you want to do, rather than just flinging spaghetti at a wall. So then let's talk about, you've got your designs, which were created by a graphics designer and her friend who is the UX designer. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that I just want to show people that this level of just getting friends in, getting freelancers in, that's normal and that's a good thing. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes that person is the person you meant to work with, sometimes you get unlucky, but that you only know, it's a bit like dating, you only know if you actually turn up to the date. So once you have got your designs, then you are thinking of what to do in terms of development. And you decided to custom build your product. And why is that?
Yeah, first of all, when we were building, even way before launching Ivy, when we were building the prototype and like the initial platforms, the year was like 2010, right? So, and actually back then there was a lot less plug and play solutions. So I definitely think that if we were starting from the very scratch today, we might have used some pre-built platform, at least to start. However, it might have been actually a blessing in disguise that we didn't have that option, because yes, it's more painful building a custom thing, right? At the same time, if you're really wanting to cater to your clients in a great way, it's good to have that flexibility to do whatever you want. Like if you want to add a new functionality, you can do whatever you want in a custom platform, whereas a plug and play solution, it's not possible sometimes, right? Like you can only customize to a certain point. So there's a trade-off there. I think even more important, if I were starting today from scratch, there's so much out there that, even if it's not a white label solution, it's just like in general, like operating a business using different tech products that enable you to, process payment, display content, do this customer relationship management. There's so much out there that
them together.
Yeah, if I were starting now, and by the way, so actually our B2B platform, so initially we had, for a vast majority of our history, we had a consumer-facing B2C platform, totally custom. And then during COVID, when we had a ton more organizations joining, we realized that just sending their people to the B2C platform was not the best experience, because there's a lot going on the B2C one. And really on the B2B side, the key was, here's what's coming up, here's the previous events, and like no more complications, right? So we had to build that, but we didn't have it yet, like that simpler version. So what we did actually was we used everything from, I know it sounds really like funny, but like everything from Google Docs to other ways in which a business could leverage our content for themselves. And you know what? It worked. Was it amazing? No. but it worked enough. So it showed me that, wow, even if we had no website, we could probably still operate today. But obviously with the website, it's so much more impressive and so much smoother. And the data capture and reporting, all of that, you need that. But if I were starting today, I would actually think about, to prove the point, to whether it's a B2B or B2C business, for my first customer, for my first 10 customers, how can I make them a promise and deliver on that promise and charge and deliver and capture feedback without necessarily even building something because, even getting the designs done, that's even going to take time. But ultimately, you yourself, if you're, it really depends on what your business is. If it's a super techie, if the whole point is an app that does X, Y, Z, you know what? You can still probably manually do some of that service and get that feedback so that you have real customers, you have real insights as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, we chose to do it custom. And initially, we worked with an outsourcing firm in Poland. We found that, their English was super good. They really got it. They were young people, really driven like us. And we had that really good camaraderie. So, and also we could afford that level, right? We couldn't afford to hire technical people in-house in the States quite yet. And we weren't as comfortable outsourcing it to places where it was, it just didn't feel like they really got the mission. So that's how we started. And I'm happy to go deeper into different solutions. Yeah.
I would love to know more because, so first of all, to your earlier point, I think it's really important that people know that stitching different technologies together is completely normal. For example, that's how Uber was born. It was basically Google Maps and I think PayPal. And obviously Uber paid a bit for development, but now they've got self-driving cars and all of that. But actually, that's not at all how it started. But in terms of outsourcing, this is something that we talk about quite a lot here, because I think traditionally, especially Silicon Valley investors, speak against outsourcing. But literally, I think pretty much every single non-technical founder that we've had in Tech for Non-Techies that runs a successful business has worked with outsourced developers at some point. And I think that the tide against working with outsourcing firms, it is turning. Okay, if you're working on Google DeepMind, then of course that's not going to be relevant. But if you're building, if the thing that you're selling is not technology, but you're using technology to enable a particular process or to enable a particular service, then actually outsourcing is totally fine. So I just really want to point out that, okay, we have another example of a successful founder of a technology-enabled business that worked with outsourced developers, and things seem to have gone all right for you. So how did you manage to hire these outsourced developers? How did you know whom to hire? Because, there are some charlatans out there.
Yeah. So we had good and bad experiences. We also tried everything. We had this Polish firm. Then we had a partnership between an in-house plus outsourcing. Then we went all in-house. And actually right now, we actually have an unbelievable tech partner in Vietnam. That's been amazing. And actually, it's the best setup we've had. So actually, currently we're outsourced, and it's never worked better in terms of speed, partnership, agility, and just in terms of ROI, also in terms of what we're spending. So I do think it does depend a little bit on the type of company, but both with that initial designer I told you about, as well as the outsourced developers, it all came down to referrals. So for the designer, Carolina, I had a business school classmate called Amy, who actually founded an amazing big company called Bobble Bar in the US. So she was a section mate in business school, and I told her, hey, I'm looking for someone to turn into visuals, what we're up to. And she said, all right, Beri, well, I've interviewed 35 different designers, and the best one by far is Carolina. So guess how many designers I interviewed? Just Carolina. And we dove in. Similar with the tech outsourcing firms, when they come extremely highly recommended from someone that they worked with before, that makes all of the difference because like someone is making that recommendation. So I think you would probably need to be crazy to work with a tech firm where you don't know anyone that's worked with them before, right? Like that would be a terrible mistake. So don't do that. Like definitely, leverage your network or like talk to people who've built businesses that you really like and hear from them who it's worked for, because it's very unlikely for someone to recommend you to someone that's going to be an epic fail. That's unlikely to happen, or less likely to happen than just Googling firms and looking at online reviews and going with that. So I would say probably personal recommendation was the biggest suggestion I could give is like, go off of somebody else's recommendation, someone that you really respect or someone whose business you really respect.
I've literally written an ebook on the topic because I get asked this so much. So I've recommended the people that I've worked with. And how did I get them? I got them because somebody recommended them to me. I worked with them for years. And so now I'm happy to recommend them. And there's also a list of companies that other non-technical founders who have been on this channel, whom they've recommended. So if you want to share the name of the company you're working with, fantastic. If you want to keep them to yourself, also totally understandable. So in terms of investors, do you have investors?
Yeah, we have investors.
And how did they react to non-technical founder and outsourcing? Because some investors have a negative reaction to it. Some investors don't care at all.
Our investors, I think, trusted us, that they trusted us, and then also seeing is believing. They liked our platform. They liked how it looked. They liked how it functioned. So obviously, in the early days, it wasn't as smooth as it is now. But we didn't have anyone that was like hardcore against it. Now we're further along, right? It's obviously easier when you're starting, most people will tell you, here's like 1,000 reasons why what you're doing is not going to work potentially. But once it's working, like obviously you have a bit more credibility and legitimacy, like, well, there is a platform that works and so on. It really just depends on like the value proposition of your business. Like being very strong technically is key. The question is that your co-founder? Is that your CTO? Or is it the firm that you've partnered with? But like showing your investors or being able to say with a straight face, I'm super confident in our technical ability, like our ability to develop fast, really good products that scale, that work fast, and all of that kind of stuff. Because even if you have the best quote unquote in-house team, but you take forever to deploy something, or it's all buggy and things like that, like no one's gonna care, right, where they are. So I think just having confidence. And by the way, we host a lot of talks on 21st century business, like how to succeed in this like constantly changing world with high degree of volatility. And not just with technical partners, but partnerships in general. Compared to how it was even 5-10 years ago, it's becoming such that like there's a reason why like LVMH will partner with Supreme, right? I think trying as a brand or company to do everything under your own roof is a fool's errand. Like you're never going to be the best at absolutely everything. And it just makes sense. Like in the past, I used to think I didn't do this as much with my techie people, but I definitely did it. My initial reaction after business school was, oh, something is working. Oh, it's because this person is doing this. My immediate reaction was, let's hire more people to do that thing. So we do more of that thing and so on. And that's actually not good. So I think now it's all about, hey, something is working or not working, but especially when it works, all your colleagues will push you. Well, we're now getting slammed, like we need help for. In the past, I would actually look to hiring as a solution. Now, my thoughts always are, one, can we automate this? Can we use technology to do that even better? And even like whoever's doing that, can we actually have them not do that or focus on the more upper tier things? How can we automate? That's my first question. Second question, how can we outsource it? Can we have a virtual assistant do this? Can we have a consulting company? Let's say it's a content strategy. Instead of us hiring a full-fledged, incredible content superstar, let's just hire a firm to work on that for a week for us. much cheaper, and like it can help us think, okay, do we hire, do we actually partner with that firm? Only as a last resort, not because it's bad, but just because it's the most expensive in terms of time and money to hire somebody full-time. Only then, okay, do we really need to hire somebody? So that's our rubric now. Like, we need something done. Can we automate it? Can we outsource it? And then if we're absolutely going to hire, how do we make sure the person we hire is the best ever? And honestly, Carolina, the designer I talked about, she did eventually, after 2 years, join us full-time, and we worked together for 10 years, okay? That's the longest I've worked with anyone. But she was still a freelancer for a long time, right? It's okay. We just had an amazing partnership, and I didn't have all of her time. But you know what? Her time was also very expensive. So we almost came of age as a company to be able to bring her in. She moved from Boston to New York to be with us in person. So sometimes if you want the rock star, you don't need necessarily, 60 to 80 hours of their time every single week. With some people, you can do less. And so partnerships are critical, whether in technology or otherwise.
Actually, this is a really good point. I remember one of the advisors to my first company, he is quite a senior engineer at Facebook, and he works in AI, so really, really quite advanced. And I remember him telling me that, look, the amount you're getting from me is actually the amount that you can handle right now. Because even if you could afford me, which, given that he was getting paid millions at a startup, that was not going to be a thing. But he said, even if you could afford me, you don't need my skill set full time. You need me to turn up and do what I'm doing. And that's probably, in his case, it was about altogether a day a week. And that was enough. So we're almost finishing up. So any last minute questions, send them to me. I'll put up your hand. But my question to you, Beri, is, do you have a CTO, or did you ever have a technical co-founder?
No, I did not, and I currently don't have one either.
Okay, great. So finally, actually, again, this is something that I'm really seeing a lot on from our other guests. So we had Robin Exton. I don't know if you've had her on your channel, but if you can, then do. She's a Y Combinator alumna, and she's the founder of Her, which is basically a dating community for queer women. And she is a non-technical founder, and she's an essay writer, like the two of us by nature. And she founded a business which now reaches millions. She's kind of a Silicon Valley darling, and she's completely the opposite of the Stanford AI person. And the fact that she went through a Y Combinator actually really proves, I think, maybe Silicon Valley is changing. Anyway, she didn't have a technical co-founder that went through this journey with her. It was her that really took it forward. So finally, any last parting words to a smart person who is, maybe at business school or recently graduated from business school? They're thinking, I want to start some kind of tech-enabled venture. I don't know what to do. What would you say to them?
Excellent. So first of all, I would say whoever your startup hero is, right? Whether it's the founder of Bumble, or whether it's Elon, whether it's Steve Jobs, whoever it is, right? When you really deconstruct what makes them so great, you will often find it's not just their coding ability. Even with Bill Gates, who was a hardcore techie guy, right? Elon is an engineer, but he's not a rocket builder like by trade, right? But in any case, if you look at what makes them great, it really is this combination of like being able to visualize something and then work from first principles to build it up in a way that is more effective than how others are doing it. So I would say being a non-technical founder might be a disadvantage in the sense that you can't code it yourself, but it's an advantage because thank God I get involved in everything in my business, but I can't get involved in coding because I can't do it. And maybe that's the best, because that's freed me up to not waste my time on that when I'm not going to be the best at that anyway. Maybe it would be better if I was also bad at like a couple of other things, so my team would be a lot happier. So I didn't keep intervening with certain other things. But so I think, a lot of the people I respect the most in business, whether they're technical or not technical, when I really reflect on what is it that I respect about them, it's certainly not the beauty of their code, right? It really is about their ability to persevere through highs and lows, stick to their convictions, and, keep adapting as the world changes. No matter how good your initial version is, even if it's the best ever, guess what? In 2 years, it's going to be completely obsolete in every way, and you will have needed something new to keep adapting. So I think that mindset is really important. And then one thing that I wish someone like took me by the collar and shook me in business school or in college or in elementary school, wherever, I've met coming out of business school, it really seemed like the norm. You raise a bunch of money, you burn it as fast as you can to show traction and growth and all of that kind of stuff. But since business school, I got to join, let's say, YP or Young Presidents Organization, right? These are people who, I run a small business compared to a lot of these people who like run some gigantic ones. And I realized that, so many of them didn't raise a penny of funding. And not all of them just came from money. A lot of them actually started with nothing. And somehow, some way, they made it happen. And one really good analogy I heard from one of those people that I really respect, he said, I never raised money. So it was like holding onto a steering wheel of a car where I could feel every bump on the road, every gravel and everything. What investment does is, yes, you can invest faster, you can go quicker, but it numbs you to real customer feedback sometimes and like real traction. So the biggest question I would ask is, whatever your concept is, right? How can you just get 10 customers without having, your time is valuable too. So if you're spending time, that's already money invested, but like with a minimum amount of additional development or money, how can you deliver for them anyway, using what's already out there and letting them know, yeah, you're just trying something out. You'd love to serve them. Maybe charge them 1/10 of the price that you were typically going to charge to your customer, and proving the point. And today, more than ever, it's possible to test things out. And that's not to say, by the way, if you can raise money, absolutely do it. But when you do raise it, don't be tempted to just like, let me just spend $1 million on Facebook because that will definitely move the numbers up. It's not the same as like, slowing down a little bit and really proving things out a bit more organically. I love our investors. They helped us tremendously. But I do also massively respect the people who were able to do it without raising money. And most businesses out there didn't raise VC money, right? Most of the ones we respect the most. So just something to keep in mind. So it's not just technical co-founders, it's also this like tech mindset to growth. A lot of the most amazing tech businesses also didn't raise. They just built something amazing that was able to scale, on its own without having to spend tons of money on marketing or very expensive employees. Just some foods for thought, and always happy to, if anybody wants to chat more, Sophia, feel free to share my email and the link to this, and people can get in touch as they so wish.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so useful and so inspiring. And I can't wait until the world opens up again and I can go to one of your fantastic events. So on that note,
absolutely.
Enjoy Miami. And to everybody else, we've got the Tech Non-Techies Book Club meeting next week, and we will be covering AI. On that note, have a fantastic day or evening, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Sophia. See you, everybody. Bye.
Wasn't that awesome? I'm inspired. This was so good. If you are loving what you're learning and you want to go deeper and become powerful, because knowledge is power, that's what we're doing at Tech for Non-Techies, then come and check out our membership. You will get access to a live session with an expert every week to help you navigate the world of tech. You'll also get an impressive library of content, member meetups, and coaching sessions with me. So basically, what is not to like? So that's it for now, Smarty Pants. Have a fabulous day, and I'll speak to you next week. Ciao.